We're really pleased to have Ann Ross here today from California. She was a new dealer at our club show last October and hope she'll be back this year as well. But we loved hearing from her and appreciate her participation and helping us today with a program on Billy Possum and Teddy Bear postcards. And she has lots of stories, and so we're going to let her take over and to tell us about those two animal and how they fit in politically, and it'll be a good time for all. Thanks for being here, Ann, and I'll
Mhm.
turn it over to you now. Thank you.
It's nice to see so many familiar faces, people that I've met at postcard shows, and other people who are members of my Facebook group, Artist Signed Postcards 1890 to 1950. And I'm sure most of you I know are seasoned collectors, so you're familiar with Billy Possum. And I, of course, got interested in Billy Possum through because of the artist signed postcard angle. Yeah, I learned that the Billy Possum and the teddy bear had an interesting relationship. And somewhere along the line, it hit me that an easy way to think about their relationship and how they evolved was to imagine the teddy bear in the position of the beloved Beatles and the Billy Possum, who was in the role of the upstart monkeys. The teddy bear, like the Beatles, rose to fame through natural events. It was all a natural unwinding of things. But Billy Possum, like the monkeys, who were basically designed through classified ads that record company executives placed to get they wanted to make this group the American version of the Beatles, so it was a very um, calculated move. And there's a lot in the literature, postcard literature, that Billy Possum was a deliberate attempt to create a fad, just like with the monkeys. Both of them had a common origin in newspaper cartoons, and both of them became mascots. Of course, the teddy bear was Teddy Roosevelt's mascot, and Billy Possum became Taft's mascot. And Billy Possum, whether in his guise as a cartoon, whether he was a postcard or a stuffed animal, he was part of this rather bizarre movement to dethrone the teddy bear with help from a presidential endorsement, postcards, and a merchandising campaign. Now, the first Billy Possum to actually be put into a physical form in the form of a sketch, you can see here, it was Louis C. Gregg, the cartoonist for the Atlantic Constitution, who was responsible for this particular sketch that you see on the right of the screen, titled The New National Toy, with William Howard Taft holding up the possum, who he sounds like, this always reminds me of Michael Jackson. Beat it, teddy bear, beat it. Holding the possum over Roosevelt and Roosevelt's little mascot, the teddy bear, who says, I can see my finish. And it is titled at the top, If Teddy Bear, Why Not Billy Possum? Now, catalyst for all of this was Asa Candler, who was the founder of the Coca-Cola Company, and he was also the president of the Atlanta Chamber of Commerce. Late in 1908, early in January of 1909, he had this idea to plan a fancy banquet in Atlanta for President-elect William Howard Taft. And there are two versions of who decided what Taft was going to eat. The first version is that Asa Candler figured it out. The second version is that William Howard Taft requested the menu, possum and taters, sweet potato, to be on the menu with other other things, which was a traditional dish in the South, particularly in Georgia, um, and was very important for African Americans at the time. So some people nowadays, we might think of that, well, is that cultural appropriation? But back then, they didn't really care about those kind of things. Now, on January 5th, 1909, Louis Gregg's Billy Possum sketch that you see here on the right was copyrighted, and the intent was for publishing it in the original sketch in the newspaper. And here you see, I got this off newspapers.com. It was smack dab in the center of the very first page in the Atlanta Constitution on January 10th. And they also intended to turn it into a postcard. Here on the right is the postcard version of that sketch that you just saw that was published as a cartoon in the newspaper. This was the first Billy Possum postcard as we know today. Louis C. Gregg got connected with the publisher, who was a local bookstore in Atlanta. And the local bookstore bought the reproduction rights to this particular sketch that you see here, and they enlarged it to be made into a postcard. And then they asked Louis C. Gregg, can you please make us 5 more sketches that we can make into postcards? So the other 5 in this first set of 6 here, the ones that are colored, those other 5 and the other cards in the black and white set on the left, they were all originally created specifically for postcards. And the only one that ever appeared in the newspaper was the one that you see on the right. So they made a black and white set that was less expensive, and a 4-color set, that the one that you see on the right was more expensive. And other postcard artists kind of jumped on the bandwagon. And there's a cruel streak through some of them that you see the beginning of it here on the right with Gregg's postcard of the possum giving teddy bear a kick in the pants. Now, I've read that some of these postcards, the Billy Possum postcards, were copyrighted before the inauguration, but not published until after Taft's inauguration in March of 1909. So some of them can be considered campaign postcards and some aren't. And here we go to the Possum Dinner, which was held on January 15th in 1909 in a big auditorium in Atlanta. And you see in the back of this picture along the wall under the American flag is William Taft and Asa Candler and a bunch of other people. And these men, it's almost all men. Mrs. Taft could not attend, so the organizers, including Candler, decided that the banquet would be only open to men, with one exception. They allowed Miss Willie Taylor to come to the banquet. And after the banquet everybody was done eating their possum, and you can even find the menu. The menu is in the newspaper. In newspapers.com, you can figure out there's a seating chart, so you can see who all these men are. So the one woman that was allowed to attend was Miss Willie Taylor, and I believe she was the daughter of the Georgia's, he was a clerk to the Senate and an attorney and a journalist. She came up to William Taft when the banquet was, everybody was done eating. They were giving speeches and, complimenting each other and that sort of thing. And she had a woolen opossum that she made by hand, and she presented it to Howard Taft, and she mentioned it. She described it as being Billy Possum, the successor to the teddy bear. Now, it's said in a lot of sources that Asa Candler, who designed this banquet and who was the founder of the Coca-Cola Company and pretty much the richest man in Georgia, it's said in a lot of sources that he was the first possum manufacturer of the stuffed version of the Billy Possums, the plushies. Um, and I was wondering about that because he's already involved in the huge Coca-Cola company. Is this really true? And I'm a great one for questioning things. So I went and I looked online on newspapers.com, all over the place, couldn't find much anything about Asa Candler founding a possum manufacturing company, although he could have been like a silent partner or board member. So I wondered, what is behind the rise of the Billy Possum plushies, the stuffed animals? And I found some pretty interesting things online. The driving force behind all the Billy Possums, whether they were postcards or stuffed animals, has been presented in other articles and books to have been the fact that the toy manufacturers were worried that the teddy bear that you see here on the left of Roosevelt's shoulder, that the teddy bear would end and go out of popularity. The fad for teddy bears would end when Teddy Roosevelt went out of office as president. So they were all concerned about how can we make money if the teddy bear disappears? What can we do? This postcard is a pretty scarce card. It's kind of hard to find. It was copyright in 1907 by T.R. Gaines. And in the verses here on both sides, you pretty well see the answer. I mean, they're very obvious that it's alluding to toys, because on the right, as this is described in worthpoint.com, which is where I got this illustration, they describe this as a little girl. Well, she's actually a doll. And on those old-timey illustrations, if you have the devil on one side and an angel on the other side of your shoulder, this is kind of a play on that. And the teddy bear says, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but at the end of it, it says, if to run you don't agree, that is, Teddy doesn't agree to run in a third term. My finish I can plainly see. And then the dolly on the other side of his shoulder says, teddy bears for years, have caused dolls lots of woe. Please don't run, 'twill end this fad and make every dolly glad. So this, to me, what I'm hearing here is those toy manufacturers' fears in this postcard. And it also made me wonder, were any of these toy manufacturers, the manufacturers of the teddy bear, etc., were they funding some of these anti-teddy bear postcards? I don't really know the answer to that, but it's just a question that's been in my mind. Who was the first to manufacture a stuffed Billy Possum? Now, if it wasn't Asa Candler, who was it? There was way back in, I think, 1907, an article in the newspaper that stated, it was a small article, and it stated, Asa Candler has received a letter in his office from a woman who wants to know. She was requesting information on the company, the first company to make the Billy Possum plushies. And in the article, it says, Mr. Asa Candler could not provide an answer to her question. Now, if Asa Candler had been involved in the first Billy Possum that was being created and marketed, would he really have stayed silent? I would have thought he would have wanted to provide that information. So, but I have never found anything other than that in the newspapers. In my research so far, I've never found anything that links Asa Candler to the founding of one of these Billy Possum manufacturers for the stuffed animals. Although there is supposedly a toy manufacturers magazine from 1909 that talks about this, I haven't been able to find a copy of that on anywhere like the Internet Archives or Hathi Trust Library. Neither one of them have it. So I haven't been able to look at that. But certainly Asa Candler could have been a silent partner. But the person who appears the most often in the newspapers connected with Billy Possum, who directly talks about founding a company, you see here, Mrs. DeForest Allgood, who was known by her given name of Susie. She was a wealthy Atlanta socialite known to be the most beautiful woman in Georgia, or some people say the most beautiful woman in Atlanta. Her husband, their family had cotton mills, and the Allgoods had two sons. In 1898, Mrs. Allgood was volunteering in a military hospital during the Spanish-American War. The following year, her husband was murdered in some kind of a dispute by a relative. I think it was his brother-in-law, who was a doctor. And sad to say, just a few years later, in 1903, when she was, after she was widowed, her 5-year-old son died, and he, sadly, this is terrible, he drank a bottle of medication that was intended for her, and he died. So she's now a single mother. She has to take care of her second son, who was, I think, a little bit older than the one that died. And all the papers say kind of patronizingly, well, by 1909, she needed something to do. And that's what got her thinking about, what else can I do? And the Billy Possums. But I tend to think of that. She is a single mother, even if she inherited money from her husband after he was killed, that she's going to be concerned about a regular income for her son. So I found interviews with her in the Atlanta newspapers where she says, okay, here's how I got the idea to make Billy Possums. I read in the newspaper about Asa Candler's meal plan for the president, the possum and the taters, and then this got me I decided once I saw that, where my head went was to introduce kids to Billy Possum and politics through making plush animals on a large scale. So I believe that is Mrs. Allgood who should be credited as the inventor of the plush Billy Possums on a large scale. Now, of course, the other lady, of course, is Willie Taylor, who had that one during the banquet for Taft, but we don't know. Was that a prototype? I don't know. I haven't been able to figure that out. So next I wondered, okay, so what did the Billy Possum stuffed animal look like? I got curious about that. Now, there were 3 companies eventually that produced Billy Possum plush animals. And you see some of the contemporary illustrations here from the newspaper. On January 11th, 1909, there was an article in the newspaper about there were several people who were interested in making stuffed animals. One company was already forming, and that Taft had approved that the stuffed animals could be marketed in his name, Billy Possum. Now, Mrs. Allgood, she was a real marketing dynamo. She had a lot of creative ideas, and her company was, mentioned frequently. She was in the papers frequently, and the other 2 companies, I don't know a heck of a lot about them because there's not a lot available. I do know that the company that Mrs. Allgood founded, the Georgia Possum Company, they actually sued one of the other manufacturers. And I haven't been able to find the outcome yet. But at any rate, Susie, in the interview in the newspaper, in the Georgia newspaper, on January 17, 1909, which was only 2 days after the banquet, Susie hightails it up to Washington, D.C. She gets a patent on her, plans for a Billy Possum plushie. And then the next weekend, she goes to New York. She hires designers. She gets two factories in northern, like New Jersey, across the river from New York City, two factories to make the possums. And then she gets an office in the Flatiron Building. Before, let's see, January 25th of 1909, there's a corporation like directory that I found in New York City where she's listed as the president, organizer, and major shareholder of the Georgia Billy Possum Company. And her son, excuse me, her son was listed as a secretary. Asa Candler is nowhere mentioned at all. And she had designed Billy Possums in 4 different sizes. The tiniest one was 4 inches, and the biggest one was life size, and the life size one was made out of real possum fur. Then she contracted with a big department store and got them to display. They were in 4 different cities on the East Coast, got them to display her stuffed Billy Possums in their windows. Then the next idea that she has, she gives, when she's up in New York, she has 2 live possums sent to the famous actress Anna Held, who does like plays and musicals and whatnot on Broadway. On January 25th, 1909, Anna Held takes that live possum on stage with her on Broadway while she's singing a song that was already in this play that she's in, or musical that she's in, I've Lost My Little Brown Bear. And what does that make everybody think of? Of course, Teddy Roosevelt. And in addition to that, Mrs. Allgood sent 2 possums, live possums again, up to DC to be in the inaugural parade. She sends a whole bunch of those little 4-inch Billy Possums that she had made to the Georgia delegates to wear on their lapels of their coats during the inaugural parade. Then she makes arrangements with an author illustrator to publish a Billy Possum book of rhymes. And there's also, everybody jumped on the possum bandwagon. Georgia was possum mad, they said. And they all want to make a buck. And of course, the postcard artists are included in that. And so the Georgia, everybody wants a possum as a pet, or they want to learn how to cook and eat it, that sort of thing. So everybody's just crazy about opossums. So the marketing was very clever, and it's often referred to as a ruthless marketing plan. But I can see how you would say that, but at the same time, I have sympathy for particularly Mrs. Allgood losing her son. She really needs to make sure that she's got a consistent income. So besides this campaign with this stuffed animal, we also had political postcard campaigns where different political, I guess, local clubs would send out Billy Possum postcards to get interest. Now, this postcard that you see on the left here, I have a feeling this is probably the rarest. I'm not entirely sure, but you guys can chip in on this. The rarest of the Billy Possum postcards. It was sold, one of them was sold in 2016 for $105 by a man named Chuck Finley, who I think some of you may know. He had originally bought it, and I have to put this in, he originally bought it about 40 some years ago from Susan Nichols at the Wichita Postcard Show. Now you can see here that at the bottom, it's signed by somebody named Cecil Spooner. And Chuck Finley, I got this off of Worth Point, and in his description of this card, he says that the history of the card, where he bought it from, and obviously how much is sold. But the one thing he didn't do was figure out who Cecil Spooner was. Well, I thought at first, oh, it's somebody who sent this card to somebody else. Well, you look on the back and it's never been sent. As you can see here, it's an unused card. So I got curious, who is a lady riding on Billy Possum? And I thought, well, it could be Taft's wife. It could be Mrs. Allgood. And then I looked up Cecil Spooner, the name on the bottom. Cecil Spooner was an actress. And from her portraits in the newspaper, I determined this is a caricature of Cecil Spooner, who was considered, she was called things like a dainty dynamo. She was bubbly and happy and very, very popular, a very popular actress. And the way I learned that this card came about, I also looked up the person on the bottom. Who the heck is Pink Cherry? Which sounds like I don't know, a stripper or something like that nowadays. Pink Cherry was actually a man named Pinckney Cherry. He was a butcher in Atlanta who had a big, like a market on Broadway. So apparently he was quite wealthy. His wife is always in the society column doing this, that, and the other. Well, Pinckney Cherry wrote on the back of this card, as it is impossible to present you all with a live possum, we do the next best by sending you a photo. Have you a friend away who knows Billy Taft and not Billy Possum? We can make the acquaintance for you. And I'm like, what is going on here? This is not your usual like political campaign card. So I did some digging and I found that on February 18th, 1909, Cecil Spooner had been in Atlanta. She was scheduled to be there for 2 weeks. She was performing at the Lyric Theater, and she performed lots of different plays and musicals. On that date, February 18th, 1909, Pinckney Cherry gave Cecil Spooner a live possum at like an intermission in her performance at the Lyric Theater. So that's has something to do with this postcard. Now, where it says by sending you a photo, obviously this isn't a photo. So I looked in the papers again and it said that Cecil Spooner was scheduled to have a photo shoot with this live possum, but I never found out. Has it actually happened? I didn't get that piece, but I do believe that this card, I'm not exactly sure whether there are advertisements and things in the newspapers that say that Cecil Spooner had like these I can't remember the term that she used for it. It's sort of like a reception, and she would, in between acts of her play, she would invite the ladies up on the stage and she would meet them, and she may have given this postcard to them, or they would pick one up when they came to the theater. So I'm not really sure. There are mentions in advertisement that she's giving away souvenirs. Was it these cards? Was it a little 4-inch possum to pin on your lapel, or, you know, like a brooch? I don't know. It's all guesswork right now, but it's obvious that these were to promote not only Billy Possum and Cecil Spooner, but also, of course, Taft as well. So here you see the artists are starting to jump on the bandwagon. We have a couple more to look at. Now, here are two very simple ones, and I have a tendency to do all artist signed stuff. So I wanted to do some of these. I call the one on the left a composite card. I'm not really sure what the official name is for it. It's a card when they're in transition between, relying on lithography for postcards and then going to photography. So it has both in one card. Transition card, composite card. Most of the early postcards were done very quickly, so they're kind of crude. And they were done often by people who didn't really know what a possum looked like. So we have several that are rather crude. And then gradually we see some that are better. Now, the last one we looked at was very well drawn. The Cecil Spooner card was very well drawn. And it reminds me of the French political satire cards. These cards are a little bit crude and awkward, so they kind of fall in the middle. And during Taft's campaign, Teddy Roosevelt mentored him, and he expected Taft to carry on his progressive policies once he was elected. I'm sorry, once he was inaugurated and started his presidency. Taft was more conservative and more like business driven than Teddy Roosevelt, who was so progressive. Taft failed to honor some of these things that Roosevelt wanted him to do. So Roosevelt got annoyed, he got really pissed off, and their relationship, because Taft had been Teddy Roosevelt's Secretary of War, I think, is that right? You guys can correct me. He was in Roosevelt's cabinet and they were friends, but now their relationship started to sour. And I wondered, well, is that why some of these Billy Possum cards get pretty nasty? I don't know, but their relationship didn't get really, really bad until towards the 1912 election, when Teddy Roosevelt started saying negative things about Taft publicly. So these are, good examples of some I think they're fairly common black and white cards. Correct me if I'm wrong. Here's another earlier card that was registered in the copyright books. I looked online in the Internet Archive for copyright books, and there are copyright books in their annuals from the Library of Congress. And this was listed as registered by Frank J. Cohen from Atlanta, Georgia. So copyright was registered February 1st, 1908. And it actually, this card appeared in an Atlanta newspaper, where it was described as postcards were the latest fad connected to Billy Possum, these Billy Possum postcards. It describes a little bit about the card. This postcard here hints at how the public in Atlanta, Georgia, and Georgia as a whole viewed opossums. And I kind of looked this up because I was curious about it. I grew up with possums in my backyard, so I was curious. And the things that I found was, well, if you keep possums as a pet, they'll chew your furniture. Then there's lots of stories. They're smart, they're sly, they're cunning tricksters, but they're also very, very brave. And when hunting dogs go after them, they will actually attack dogs. Then they have this evil grin, which you can see here. This guy looks like a real sly character. Evil grin, sharp teeth. And they were also seen as thieves because they come out at night and go puttering around in your garbage, as I experienced when I was a kid. They were seen as thieves. So there was this negative concept of what they were like, which was, kind of anthropomorphic, if you ask me. And so this is an interesting card that, okay, Billy Possum is supposed to represent Taft, but look at how sly he looks. It's just very interesting. And here's another one. This is a set, and Fred Lounsbury he published, I think, probably the most Billy Possum related cards, and you can also correct me if I'm wrong about that. This set, I have 3 of them here, sepia tone cards. They appear to have been registered copyright on a little bit after the other card that we just looked at, February 16th, 1909. And there were a set of 4, and the Lounsbury they submit prints to be made into, postcards, or, prints to hang on the wall, that sort of thing. And these cards introduced the character Jimmy Possum, who represented Taft's vice president, James Sherman. I have the 2 cards here. I'm sure you guys have probably seen them. Goodbye, Teddy. And, they're exchanging well wishes. So this is pretty amiable. And then Moving Day, here is Billy Possum on the right and Jimmy Possum on the left. and they're walking towards the White House, and everything is amiable until you get to the card on the top right, which says only possums escaped. And here is a Billy Possum and his little possum family, and a hunter with a dog in the background, which I am not really able to see this card because I don't have one in my collection and I can only see it online. But I assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the hunter looks a little bit like Teddy Roosevelt. Certainly he has his portly tummy. And Roosevelt loved hunting, as I'm sure most of you know. So that card kind of gave me the woolies because it kind of implies subtly that Teddy Roosevelt, wanted Billy Possum and by extension Taft dead, which probably wasn't entirely true in reality. I think that's kind of an extreme example. So that card and some of these other cards, they have double meanings, which I really find, very interesting. And the next we have is some cards by a woman artist, Ethel DeWeese. I'm not sure how to pronounce her last name, DeWeese. She did some more designs for another set of cards. And I think this is another set of 6. Yes. And here we have the ultimate example of artists not doing their research. And her cards, they are rather strange. Some of them get a little bit better than the other. But here on the right, we have Billy Possum. He has feet that look like, they remind me of eagle's claws, eagle's talons, and he has a beak like a platypus. So I don't think she's ever seen a live possum. And DeWeese was the one artist who really got into this, making Billy Possum to be an obvious personification of William Howard Taft. So she included in these cards stuff that people identified with Taft. He loved playing golf. He was, I think, the first president to ever play golf. He went to Yale. So, and then on the left here, you see Billy Possum. He's studying. He's a student at Yale. I'm sorry, he's not studying. He's getting ready to write somebody a letter before it says he gets into the game, before leaving to play golf. These cards are fairly easily found, but I think they're quite funny, actually, to tell you the truth. And slowly we're getting a little bit better with the way the possums are depicted. Now these, I'm going to confess, these are my favorites. This was a set of 12 postcards. The publisher is AMP, which I couldn't, wait a minute, I have 2 things listed here. The printer was HSV Lithographic Company, and the publisher was a company called AMP. And if anybody knows any more about that, you can chime in once I'm done. The copyright is listed as 1909, and someone by the name of L. Gulick in New York City, who I couldn't find much anything at all on. These cards are the most colorful, and I think it's possible they could have been deliberately created to appeal to both children and adults. So again, there can be a double meaning to some of them. But this is not without 1 or 2 unpleasant cards. Now, Arthur Crichton was known by the nickname Crite, and he had experience as a cartoonist in doing newspaper cartoons. So I think he was a little bit more comfortable with turning a possum into an anthropomorphic figure than some of these other cards, the DeWeese ones and whatnot. They're awkward, and they're just very comfortable. He was very comfortable drawing this. So I really like these cards. So here are more in the set was of 12 cards, and here are more. And the cards on the left and right are pretty much self-explanatory. The one on the right, whose little possum is ooh, that one could be seen as having a dual message. Is one possum asking the other, "Are you with me?" as Billy Possum, or are you with Roosevelt? That could be the way some people at the time interpreted it, possibly. But the weirdest card is the one in the middle. The boogeyman will get you possibly if you don't watch out. And I looked at this card and I looked at this card, and it was so kind of out of sync with the other cards. And then I realized what it is. It's I see it now as a hint of the racism in Taft's campaign, in his banquet and the Great Possum Hunt. I'm going to link back to that. So you see, there's an African American possum hunter behind the tree, and he has one of those caps where, when it's cold, hunters pull the little ear flaps down over their ears. He has one of those caps on. He's hiding behind the tree, which is usually the possum's home. They love, the bigger the trees, the better. And poor old Billy Possum's got his hobo pack of stuff on his back, and he's fleeing from the possum hunter. And this reminded me of some of the stuff that doesn't appear in a lot of the articles and things on Billy Possum, that there was a racist component to the great possum hunt and the dinner, the banquet, Taft's banquet. Um, Now, and you have to kind of go back into slavery, into social history, into slavery times to figure this out. Um, During slavery times, it was the slaves who hunted the possums, but the white men ate them. Only rarely were slaves allowed to eat possum meat. They usually existed on eating potatoes and corn, and rarely were they allowed to eat any meat at all, which is surprising. How would they work in the fields? There's amazingly resilient people. So after slavery ended in the antebellum period, possum became a premier protein source for the freed slaves. And I did find some like interviews in newspapers of the time where they interviewed elderly African American people that lived in Georgia. And one of them said possum was for slaves. In other words, after slavery, this is what he had grown up with. Possums were for slaves, and turkey was for white men. So I think the Great Possum Hunt did not go over very well with the African American community. And there is a fair amount of mention in the newspapers of the day that African Americans in Georgia and in Atlanta, because the Great Possum Hunt went all over Georgia. There were people wanted to make money, and they went to, how many possums can I catch and send to, Asa Candler in Atlanta. The African Americans in Georgia actually got worried that the white men were going to kill all the possums and eat them, so there would be no more possums for the African Americans to subsist on. And eventually, thank goodness, the outcry got so much that there was an old law that was sort of, I guess, resurrected to enforce the hunting season. And apparently nobody paid attention to it anymore. So that they wanted to protect the possums. So the possums were saved from extinction in Georgia. And then here, now that we've gotten through a rather gruesome topic, here are some nice pleasant ones. These two were published by the Byrne brothers in England, who also had offices in, I think, New York. And I really like these postcards. Of all the postcards that I've seen, these are the most naturalistic. The possums look like they did when I remembered them, except maybe a little cutesy-fied, just a bit cutesy-fied. So here's Billy Possum in his patriotic guise. And the interesting thing is that Billy Possum on the right is dressed in pants that, who do you think of when you see pants like that? I think of Uncle Sam. And it refers to eating possums. Even if we eat him, he'll do us no harm. And again, both have the same little poem at the bottom. No more teddy bear will we fondle with glee. Billy Possum in future our mascot will be. So again, you think the toy manufacturers and this anti-teddy bear campaign to get rid of the teddy bear, establish Billy Possum and Taft as the favorites. And here's another nasty card. Again, Fred Lounsbury was the publisher, and the copyright, I think, in 1909, more anti-teddy bear campaigns. And this was the second set of 6. You saw the first set of 6. I'm sorry, 4? 4. You saw the first set, the sepia set, a while ago. Now, this was the cyanotype set that was published, and I don't know who the artist is. I haven't been able to find that out, but this set is all Uncle Sam. And on the right is another very brutal card. It's one of the worst, in my humble opinion. It's titled Uncle Sam's New Toy, harking back to that original sketch, the new national toy. But here, Uncle Sam has Billy Possum in his arms, and he's forgotten all about his old teddy bear because he's enamored of this new possum, and he's got his chair leg on top of the poor teddy bear. The teddy bear is being crushed. So the political machinations have resulted in some pretty cruel images. And the anti-teddy bear postcard campaign, they wanted Roosevelt and the teddy bear to be replaced by Billy Possum and Taft. And now I'm going to end with the one that creeps me out the most. Now here is Billy Possum having his what I rather call his last supper. Taft won the 1908 election, and he was president from 1909 to 1913. But Billy Possum didn't survive to help him out in that next election. And Roosevelt lost the 1914 election to Woodrow Wilson. This postcard and the last one we looked at I think they're the two most cruelest images of this anti-teddy bear marketing campaign. And I've never really found anything yet about, them people, all gathering together. Let's make a whole bunch of negative teddy bear postcards. It may have just been spontaneous. I don't know the answer to that. But what is strange about this is, that Taft at his banquet in Atlanta was eating possum. Now Billy Possum is eating the teddy bear, and it just creeps me out. So we all know that it was the teddy bear who won the Battle of the Plushies, because teddy bears still exist today. Where is Billy Possum? In museums. And I wondered, why did Billy Possum fail? Why didn't he catch on? And I went back to, my earlier examining what did people think of possums back in 1909. And in Georgia folklore, they were sly, they were sharp teeth, cunning, thief, trickster. So that's a lot of negative connotations with opossums. But also, if you want to think of it from the marketing standpoint, the supply, they made zillions of possums and zillions of them, those 3 companies, particularly Mrs. Allgood. The supply outpaced the demand. Now, why wasn't there as much demand for Billy Possum as there was for teddy bears? Well, there's a couple different reasons. First of all, the possum lacked that origin story that the teddy bear had about the teddy bear. You probably know, and I did a presentation about this a while ago. The teddy bear came out of a sketch in the newspaper where Roosevelt was shown with a cute little bear cub, and the artist had replaced a scraggly old bear with this little bear cub, and that Roosevelt had refused to shoot a scraggly old bear. So there was this heart-wrenching, cutesy story attached to the teddy bear that did not exist with Billy Possum. Billy Possum's origin was being killed when he was, caught and put in a wood cage and shipped off to Atlanta and then killed and eaten by rich white men. So that's a pretty bloodthirsty origin to have connected with you. And on top of that, there were the children's reactions. I read about children's reactions. They thought that their Billy Possums, their stuffed Billy Possums, looked like rats, and they didn't like rats, particularly if you were a child that lived in the city, in New York City. They would not want a stuffed animal that looks like a rat. But he also, I found out, Billy Possum, some of them had a voice. They had a voice. And some people interpreted it as growling, and other people said, oh, he chirps like a bird. So that was kind of creepy. And as a result of all these things together, the sales plummeted before Christmas of 1910. So we know that the teddy bear won the battle of the plushies. Billy Possum, the plushie, faded into oblivion. But we still collect his postcards because his whole story is very, very interesting. And I hope you found it interesting too. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Ann.
Yeah.
Here's your resources too, and I think that's also in the chat window. Those
Okay.
places that you can go back. We thank you very much, Ann. I'm
Oh.
so glad I didn't have to go to that possum dinner. That was grim. That was the
Yeah,
worst.
fortunately, you could choose other things other than possums to eat. There was stuff like turtle soup and, things like that, Southern food.
When
But
you hear about things like that, they always say, "Oh, it tastes just like chicken." I don't know. I don't think so.
yes.
Bill Burton, please unmute yourself and tell us if we have any comments, please.
Yeah, about the cards, things that I didn't know. If anybody knows anything to fill in the blanks, please do comment, speak up.
Yes, there are a number of comments
Great.
here, and I'm just working my way down through them to make sure I didn't skip anybody.
I hadn't had the chance to look at them. I've been so busy talking.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. You provided good information after all.
Thank you. Thank you. I was worried that everybody knew everything already.
Oh, no. No, Roosevelt and Taft had been good friends. Taft
Yes.
had been Roosevelt's vice president, and but Teddy made the mistake of announcing early on that he would not run for a third term.
Mm.
She really regretted. And then Taft sort of succeeded him. And I think really
Yeah.
Roosevelt was just plain jealous.
Yeah.
And that is the kind of rivalry.
That he regretted not running again. Yeah, he missed the adrenaline or something, the attention perhaps. Yeah, so I never really figured out the nastiness in the postcards and the nastiness between Roosevelt and Taft. I wasn't really sure how well it connected, because most of the things that I saw about their relationship going sour was that it soured long after the postcards. The last postcard I saw of Billy that had a Billy Possum on it, a teeny tiny real possum, was published in 1910. So, by 1912, when their row I've read got really pretty bad, Billy Possum postcards and whatnot were gone. They were not, Billy Possum wasn't a fad anymore.
The 4-year cycle of elections were such that you just can't keep going. And Roosevelt had all sorts of things that he was doing. He made a trip to Africa.
Yes, I remember
Safari.
that.
There are a lot of postcards of TR in Africa.
Yes.
And it just, I think it served the controversy wore itself out. You just can't keep going like that.
Yeah.
So let me start now with Phil McDaniels says,
Somebody has a question.
seems to be a catchphrase popular in 1909. I'm not sure what he meant by what it seems to be. Um, I have several cards from the Alaska Pacific World Fair, the, the date that indicate the phrase. Perhaps Billy Possum is the originator. Everyone have any other thoughts? Phil, what do you mean by this?
Well, I
Catchphrase.
was referring to the "Hello, Bill" phrase.
Oh,
And I
okay.
wrote that before you showed your two political postcards
Right.
headed by that word, "Hello, Bill."
Mm-hmm.
So now I have to assume that yes, that phrase did originate with the controversy between Billy Possum and the teddy bear. But I found it interesting that the unrelated cards to anything political from the Alaska Yukon exposition included that phrase of "Hello,
Interesting.
Bill."
Huh.
And I didn't know if that was the originator, was this controversy or not, but I think I can confirm that, yes, that's where it
Okay.
came from now.
Interesting. Okay. And I suppose it could have also been put into a song. You know, I found a lot of this Billy Possum stuff, it became songs about Billy Possum. There was a racehorse named Billy Possum. There was all over the place.
Well, you caught on early to the fact that this was a manufactured fad.
Yes.
That was, I think, rather unusual compared to what could be done today.
Yeah.
Because I mean, first of all, it started in the South, and was not necessarily something that people would go through. If it had started, say, at Chicago, that would be something else. But yeah, I'm just surprised that there isn't more about this. Ashley Aarons, who is a Southern person, says, I had no idea about Billy Possum's story or postcards. So thanks very much for what you did. Ashley, do you have any sense of the origin of the Billy Possum in the South?
No, I don't. No, in fact, I'd never heard of it. I just have a related kind of story, and that is, so I'm in Arkansas. My mom and my dad grew up here too, and in a town where my mother grew up, her high school had an annual possum dinner as a fundraiser for their high school kids for projects or whatever. So there's a possum supper is what it's called. It still happens now. And so I was fascinated to hear all about the hunt and the dinner and everything that you told us about, Anne. And I was just trying to figure out, and I don't know the origin of why possum was chosen for this annual dinner. Maybe it has along some of the same lines you were talking about. But anyway, so no, I had never heard of Billy Possum or this whole history, but there is a possum supper that I still hear about every year. It happens in January, February or so. And it's a political, I'm sorry, is that right? Yes, it's a fundraiser for the high school, but it's a place where a lot of local and I guess probably regional Arkansas politicians come to press the flesh and to campaign and to talk with constituents there. So it has a political overtone, and it has this whole possum dinner, though they do offer barbecued other meat to have otherwise. So that's what I know about it.
Okay.
Interesting.
There are
Susan
two
Lane,
interesting facts about possums.
Thanks,
They're a fascinating animal. They're the only marsupial in North America. And also, mammalogists have a whole grading of mammals in terms of parasites they carry on their skin, including fleas and ticks. Possums are the cleanest mammal in North America, cleaner than human beings. And if they were a human being, they would be considered extremely, really extremely neurotic because of the cleaning, the amount of time they
They're
spend every
very
day
cleanly.
cleaning.
And they wash their food like raccoons, right?
I don't know if they do
Probably.
that, but their personal cleanliness
Yeah.
is actually surpasses many human beings.
I do know, I'll just say that I know that they not only are clean themselves, but they eat ticks and things. And you
Yes.
want possums
Okay.
around because
Yeah.
they
They would
eat
be
things that we want them to
insectivores.
eat.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
really omnivores, but insectivores, they would, you know,
Rick, I'm
Susan
glad to
Lane
see
puts
you
in-
back
I know
again.
several people who could learn from them.
I wanted to say, Rick, I wanted to say that I recognize you from my, let's see, the Hugo Tuck presentation that I did.
Yes, yes.
Yes, I remember you made some really, really interesting comments. So I'm happy to see you back again.
Oh, yes. Western New York Postcard Club.
Susan
Okay.
Lane, put in her 2 cents and said that she knew about the Billy Possum, but not the degree to which she'd never seen any of the early cards. Do you think that there are other early cards where do you think you've pretty much surfaced everything?
No, I don't. I probably haven't surfaced everything because I was looking for specific cards and then a couple rare ones. I'm sure there's probably stuff out there that I'm not aware of. I'm not like a major collector of like I don't collect everything Billy Possum. I like the Arthur Crichton cards. I like those. So and it's the social history behind the postcards. So I'm sure there's more out there that I'm not aware of. And I just like a lot of the times I look on Worth Point, which seems to work better than looking on eBay. It goes back farther.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. Oh, the
Oh yeah, Worth Point, yeah, the eBay's not that old.
yeah, exactly.
Alan Mann says, this is an excellent presentation. He says, as a Brit, this is all new to me. So thank you for enlightening me on the specific period of the U.S. presidential electioneering.
Yeah, I to be truthful, I did see a few parallels between this and what's been going on in the United States a little bit. Yes. Not a lot, just a little there, here and there.
Alan also asked the question and said, when did they change the Constitution to stop presidents from running for a third term?
Okay, that I'm not sure I know the answer to. I've seen it online somewhere, but does anyone else know the answer?
After FDR.
After FDR, okay.
Yeah, well, no, Roosevelt, when Franklin Roosevelt was elected for a third and then a fourth term, it was wartime, and they broke the tradition of Washington of only 2 terms.
Yes,
but it was, I think, a political gesture very much to stop a president from ever going on that far.
Yeah.
Wasn't it a
I think
constitutional amendment?
48 or 49.
It is. I think it is an amendment.
Yes.
Yes, it is definitely a constitutional amendment.
It came after FDR.
Yes, and that's true. Phil Bender wants to comment. What you wanted to say something, Phil?
Yes, my father was a collector of William Howard Taft and had quite a few cards. I'm not exactly sure what the attraction was, but he obviously, was president from 12 to 16, so that was part of the golden age of postcards. They have quite a few of pictures of him, real photographs of him.
Well, Taft only served 1 term. He took over from Roosevelt TR in 08 and went through 12, and then Wilson came
8 to 12, sorry, right.
Roosevelt by then was well on his way to being a celebrity independent of being president.
Yeah. Yeah, he was, I saw a lot of things online comparing Teddy Roosevelt to JFK, that his popularity was similar. And then Taft, there were a couple of things that I kind of left out. There were things that he did during his presidency. Like I talked a little bit about that racism with the possum hunt and the banquet. But when he was president, I read that he said during his inauguration speech, his inaugural speech, that he did not want any African Americans to hold federal offices. Once he became president, he fired a bunch, and this was in the South. In the South, he had a bunch of African Americans who held federal offices. He had them given the heave-ho, fired, dismissed, whatever you want to call it. So I imagine there were people that he was not popular with. for that.
Well, it actually got worse when Wilson came in
Ah.
16.
Mm-hmm.
He was an out and out racist, and the U.S. Post Office was a haven for a lot of black middle class individuals. He cleared house.
Wow.
No, nothing shy about the guy. Wilson has a reputation in some respects of being a pretty good guy, but this was not one of his sterling
Right.
times.
He wasn't. Yeah.
Now, Gary Faber says, Ann, you need to contact me as I am a large Billy Possum collector. And I've got a lot of cards for the
Gary?
second or third term.
Uh-huh.
Gary, do you want to
There you are.
elaborate?
Hi.
Hi,
Yeah.
Ann.
Yes. Yeah, you can friend
Go
me.
ahead and elaborate, Gary.
Yes, I've been a presidential campaign postcard collector for 35, 40 years now. And the ones Hal had and the ones that my friend Leon Rowe had, I ended up having them. And I have my album here if you want me to hold up some of
Oh
the
my goodness. Yeah.
postcards that
I
I have.
imagine you have
Perhaps
some
you
good
haven't
ones.
seen them. I don't know. The Hello Bill thing was mainly a fraternal organization greeting that just got used by the people on the Billy Possum postcard. But anyway, I don't know how good the camera angle here is, but there's the Fort Lounsbury blue wash. Here's just a cute possum one. That one that you showed with the standing up has one with a moon. The man in the moon is saying, "You're my meat."
Oh, I didn't see that on the of course
There are different ones, Ann.
okay, yeah. I hadn't seen that one. You're my meat. Wow.
Here are two from Kansas with Taft.
Yeah, okay.
And Possum.
Mm-hmm.
I do have that one you talked about. They even have them. Here's one showing him as a billiken, if you know what a billiken is.
Yes, yes. They came out roughly at the same time, didn't they? Isn't that true?
Right. And there's one where Taft's the cigar smoke of.
Yes, I
Taft's
thought about adding
cigar.
that. I thought about adding that one, and I don't remember why I didn't.
And here's one showing the teddy bear saying hello to. I'm trying to get the camera right. Saying hello to Billy Possum at the train station in Washington, D.C.
That one. Oh, wow. Yeah.
So anyway, Hal would give you my my email and my contact information. I actually buy and sell Billy Possum memorabilia.
Oh, cool. How neat is that? Oh, too bad I didn't connect with you before this, but who knows?
Gary, do you have a possum stuffed animal?
I do not, but actually most of the stuff was ceramic and 3D. Like I just made a deal with a guy out in California for 3 items. One is a peace possum inside of a tree stump.
Oh, neat.
With a poem on the back of the tree talking about him wanting world peace.
Really?
Yes.
A peace possum. I've never heard of that.
There was a great, I'm from Ohio, and there was a great Billy Possum collector who was a mentor of mine in APIC, the organization Hal's and Leon was in. And I ended up with most of his collection. He was a lifelong Billy Possum collector.
Okay.
So we'll have to get together after this and exchange photos because you might be surprised what's out there.
Well, I don't, in my own collection, I don't have but, 3 or 4. I don't have a lot of them, but so I got them off of Worth Point mostly. Right. And then I have to acknowledge that I was sent one. Hal sent me one.
Oh.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and I can send you the 4th one in that sepia set, and it shows Taft as a golfer on the course.
Yes.
One shows him as a hunter, and then there's another one showing Taft out on the course.
Yeah, and I thought about including that one, but I chose the one with the hunting because that has a very a little creepy
you
vibe.
Do have that. I would send you one.
The creepy vibe stuff, the weird thing. you know, that are a little bit unusual. I wanted to show some that people were familiar with, some that were uncommon or rare, and then some that were just kind of creepy. I tried to
Well,
balance it out.
what I
Um,
say in some of my eBay descriptions is kids, it's a lot easier for a kid to fall in love with a cute teddy bear than it is
yes.
an oversized rat.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So,
So it
um,
wasn't able to be marketed as well.
now, did I say anything in my presentation that you think should be corrected, or you haven't
No,
had?
I don't think that one that you said shows the Lounsbury card that shows the teddy bear in front of the back leg. You said that the back leg is trying to kill the possum. But if he had the chair on top of the possum, you would see the foot of the chair. You see the
top
possum
of the
in
bear. The bear.
Oh, you think
or the
it's
bear.
not?
Yeah.
Oh, I'll have
Yeah.
to take a closer look at that to see
Take
how
a look
it
at the
looks
blue
like he's
wash.
being squashed.
Well, yeah, but if he was squashed, you'd see the foot of the chair on top of the bear.
Oh, you think he's
You
just
see
in
the
front of
bear
it?
in front of the
So they
leg.
wanted to, so do you think they wanted to give you the idea that he was being squished, but not actually portray it?
I don't. I think he was just being discarded. You know how
Okay,
kids are.
just threw
They want one
it down
toy
on the
and
floor.
then
Okay, all right. Okay,
and then
thank
the
you for
latest
that.
fad comes along and they want the next toy.
And they just throw it away. Okay, all right. Thank you
Yeah.
for that.
I just think there was a lot more humor involved with the possum postcard craze, making fun of things than there is
The nasty.
negativity involved. I think
Okay,
it's more
okay,
just humor.
yeah, okay.
And our humor is, we find humor from that time offensive at times,
Yeah, and I
but it
think,
was everywhere in the papers back then. And so
and I'm
we've
looking
grown
at
a
it,
lot in the last
I'm
100 years.
looking at it through 21st century eyes.
Right,
That's the other thing. And
right.
also, I used to be a social worker, so I'll go into social worker mode when I look at things. Oh, he's squishing him to death.
Yeah, I just think there was more
Oh,
humor and
yes,
satire involved
yes,
uh, than meanness.
yeah. And the one with the actress and riding on Billy Possum had
Yes, I'll look and see what mine, I've got
have
mine
one
here.
as well. Is that actually a rare card? Am I correct? Or is it just
Yeah, that's a pretty pricey card.
okay, yeah, yeah, okay.
Is yours used, Gary?
No, it was not sent.
Wow,
She must have passed them out, like she was saying.
I think so.
Yeah.
And for some
Yeah.
reason, your crate cards, there's only one that I found in sepia.
Oh,
You know,
okay, yes,
the
yeah,
set is in color, but
right.
for some reason that one was sepia. So I don't know whether he did this one first and then branched out into the color.
Uh-huh.
But this is the only one I've ever seen in the set that was done in sepia.
Now,
Great.
what was your take on the Cecil Spooner card?
Well, she's probably, like you say, an
Do you
actress.
think that is Cecil Spooner?
Oh, I would think, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And the guy, you know how they're showing her with roses and valentines. You know how they give actresses bouquets of flowers.
Yes, that's what
So
made me
I
think,
think
oh, this
that's
is
the
something
idea
about
behind it.
an admirer. Maybe she was having
Right.
an affair with Pink Cherry. I don't know. But yeah, those little roses that are attached to her arm, they spell out Atlanta on the
Right.
little roses. So here
Yeah,
I
he
am
was
asking you guys questions too and taking
he
up.
was likely an admirer, but whether he was a
I think so.
lover, I doubt if he'd
I
have
know,
made
I'm
that
just
one.
going in the extreme direction of juiciness.
Thanks for
Yeah.
doing the Billy Possum presentation. We got maybe a few more people hooked on that.
Oh, okay, all right.
Well,
Yeah.
we're out of,
I gotta ask, has anybody eaten possum in this group?
No, I wouldn't dare. No. Anybody else?
Ashley,
No,
that's just grim. I didn't know they'd
Oh.
ever do that.
Yeah, well, I have to ask my brother. My brother used to live in West Virginia, and he was a wildlife biologist. And there were people back then that, they ate a lot of game. And I'll have to ask him. Maybe he's had some. But oh yes, there was all kinds of. The other thing that I didn't mention was that the newspapers were flooded back during the opossum hunt stage. They were flooded with letters, people giving advice of here's your opossum recipe and how to cook an opossum. And then the chef that was responsible for cooking the possums for the possum dinner, there was an article that he wanted people to send him, traditional recipes. So he got flooded with possum letters. So that was interesting.
Maybe he made a cookbook.
That would be interesting to find. Gary, have you ever seen a Billy Possum cookbook?
No, I've seen little folding children's books and storybooks, and then of course Thornton Burgess did a set of books capitalizing on Unc Billy Possum.
Yes, and I left that out when I found that other, Teddy Roosevelt with a dolly and the bear on his shoulder. I left that one out because I wanted to, if there was anybody that was new, to point out that Unc Billy Possum wasn't the same. And I've seen people marketing on eBay those Unc Billy Possum cards by Harrison Cady. Yeah, I have this set of them, which I bought from Susan. They market that Unc Billy postcard as if it's part of Taft's campaign, and it's
Right.
not right. It's incorrect.
They're different.
Well, thank you all very, very much for being here